This is your complete guide to catching more catfish in cold water. If you've been struggling to get bites during the winter months, don't worry. We've got the tips and tricks you need to turn your luck around. Let's start right now. First up is finding the right spot, because in cold water in the winter months, location is everything. You want to look for catfish in deep holes, channel edges, and any areas that have underwater submerged structure like logs, fallen trees, rocks, or ledges. And if you're out on a boat or under the ice, a good fish finder will be invaluable to you during the winter months. You want to scan for clusters of fish that are holding near the bottom. Sometimes in winter, catfish will often gather in groups. You obviously want to pay attention to the water temperature as well. You want to look for warmer areas, like near power plants, dams, spillways, or where streams are feeding in to the main body of water that you're fishing. Obviously, these warmer pockets are going to attract bait fish. And where there's bait, catfish are never far behind, right on their tail. Next, let's talk about bait. In cold water, catfish are always going to prefer a meal that's worth their effort to chase. So using live bait or fresh bait is always going to be the best choice if using live bait is legal where you live. And some of the best options will always include bluegill, shad, skipjack, and a large hunk of live night crawlers. Obviously, cut bait of the same fish works particularly well because the scent disperses quickly in the water once the insides and guts and blood start to disperse. You know already that catfish have a very strong sense of smell, so the stronger the baits we're going to be using, it's just going to make it easier for the catfish to find it. That's what we want. And the best strong-smelling bait for channel catfish and bullheads in the winter is chicken liver. And the real hack is to stuff the liver in a pair of pantyhose if using nylon is legal where you live. That's going to allow us to cast the bait out to the farthest, deepest sections of the lake, and it's going to keep the liver all stay together really nice. And you can always use the prepared stink baits and dough baits that are very effective in cold water, actually. Just got to make sure that they're well secured to your octopus hook. Okay, now it's time to rig up. So for cold water catfishing, the best and most simple rig that most folks use is a slip sinker rig. That's because it allows the catfish to pick up the bait without feeling resistance or the weight of the sinker. So it's really simple. All you need to do to rig it up is to start with a sliding egg sinker fed onto your main braided line. Then you add a bright colored bead that protects your knot, and then tie on a barrel swivel. And then from there, you just attach a 12 to 18 inch long leader, and then just tie on your sharp octopus circle hook. Circle hooks are all we use for catfishing, and they're really great because they're going to hook the catfish in the corner of his mouth as opposed to gut hooking him, which is going to make for a lot easier catch and release if that's what you choose to do. And just a few comments about the line and the hook size that we recommend. For catfishing, we use exclusively braided line. We use 30-pound braid for channels and bullheads, which is more than enough to handle any fish you catch. And because when you're catfishing on the bottom, we inevitably catch a lot of huge snapping turtles. So we want to make sure we've got ample line strength. And we actually move up to 50-pound braid whenever we target flatheads or blues, because those are the biggest of the big boys. And in terms of circle hook size, we use a 4/0 to 5/0 hook for channels, and we move up to a 7/0 to 8/0 for the largest flatheads and blues. That's all you need. Now let's cover the heavy gear we're going to need to fight the catfish. First, you want to use a heavy, longer, sturdy fiberglass spinning rod, preferably in the 7 to 9 foot range, because that's going to allow you to absorb the fight of a bigger fish, and it's going to give you the casting distance that you need to get out into the deepest spots in the lake. And you want to pair your reel with a good, strong, large capacity spinning reel that can handle at least 150 to 200 yards spooled of your 30 to 50 pound braided line. We don't want to screw around when we're catfishing. Even in colder water, you got to be prepared for a good fight once you hook a giant. So let's go big or go home. Okay, hopefully you're still with us. Let's wrap this up with the last section, and that is the right techniques and presentation that we need for winter catfishing. Obviously, in colder water, patience is key when you're going after catfish. They're simply not as aggressive in the wintertime. So you got to give them a little bit more time to find and then ultimately take your bait. So in a nutshell, in winter, you cast your line out, you let it sink all the way down to the bottom, and then you wait. And if you don't get a bite after maybe 30 minutes, don't hesitate to move to a new location. And a lot of people ask us if we should still be chumming the water in the winter, if chumming is legal where you live. And we say absolutely. A little scent does go a long way. But in the winter, too much can actually drive them away. So just don't overdo it. Okay, let's break down the meat and potatoes a little bit and focus some more time on the best techniques that we need to use to find and catch more catfish in the colder winter weather. So the best approach is always going to be targeting deeper water, like we mentioned already, and sheltered areas that have slower current. So we want to use heavier weights to make sure we're getting right onto the bottom. Obviously using our larger octopus circle hooks in the winter and presenting all the baits we've talked about in a much slower presentation during winter. We want a slower drift, if you will. And if you have a map of the lake that you're fishing from the summertime, make sure you identify all the deep holes, the ledges, the drop-offs, the sunken structures that we've talked about already, and channel edges, which are all places that the catfish is going to be congregating during the winter colder months. And as you know, you have to be prepared to adjust the baits that you're using as well as the locations you're fishing based on the water temperature and the fish activity that day or lack thereof. Okay, so here's a brief summary of all the key points that we've covered so far to always keep in mind during your winter catfishing trip. First, find deep water. Deep holes, channels, and underwater structure like fallen trees, logs, and dense vegetation is where the catfish will be in wintertime. Obviously for warmer and more stable water temperature, as well as shelter to hide during these winter months. We're going to keep harping on this. And two, you want to use a slower bait presentation in winter. You want to use a slower retrieve, let your bait sit near or on the bottom for longer periods of time than you would in the summertime. Catfish are going to be less active, like we said, so you just have to be patient with them in the winter. Three, we want to be using heavier gear too, heavier weights to ensure we get the bait all the way down, and a bigger octopus circle hook like we talked about in the 7 to 8/0 for all species during winter to be able to handle bigger fish and compensate for the colder water conditions and sluggish hook sets. And number 4, we've got to be using quality, strong-smelling baits, high in protein, high fat, high oil, and high stink factor baits like cut bait, chicken liver, and the stink baits we talked about are what we need to attract sluggish catfish who just don't want to eat. Number 5, you can certainly try drift fishing if you're out on a boat or fishing a larger river by using a lighter 3-way rig to cover more water and mimics the natural food and prey movement. And lastly, number 6, as we've talked about, you have to be adaptable in winter when you're catfishing. Willing to change your baits, change your locations after 30 minutes, and adjust the presentation until you find them, and then you can put your baits right on top of them. Okay, let's wrap up. The cool thing about catfish is they are a creature of habit, and they often return to the same spots that they have found food and forage in during the year after year, even during the wintertime. So if you do get into a honey hole during the winter, we would suggest that perhaps you consider catching and releasing so that you don't over-harvest your sweet spots, and then that's going to stunt their reproduction into the late spring and summer months. Okay, folks, that's it. By following all these simple steps, by finding the right spot and location, always using fresh bait, setting up the right rig, and by being patient, you're going to greatly increase your chances of catching more catfish in the winter. Remember, success is always going to come down to preparation and persistence. Thanks for checking us out. Good luck on the water, and let us know in the comments how all these strategies work for you. Okay, folks, thanks for watching. Please like this video, hit the subscribe button before you leave, and don't forget to enable your bell notifications so you never miss another great video coming your way.